Hi, and welcome to the latest episode of the Power Briefing. I'm Howard Cleaver, the Chief Commercial Officer of O3 Energy in Dallas, Texas, and I'm joined today by Quentin Incao of Q Hospitality Management. And we're going to talk a little bit about the sorts of things that he's involved with, particularly around landscape hotels. So it was an interesting concept. We had a little chat before this, and let's dive right in. Let's define what a landscape hotel is. What's the model there? What is a landscape hotel?
That's a very good question, and it, I guess, may be subject to interpretation. But from my perspective, as far as we see it, and based on what we've been involved in and what we've read and projects we've participated in, a landscape hotel to me is kind of a blend of luxury hotels meets glamping, kind of right in the middle. It has the level of a luxury hotel, but it's outdoors in nature. So it tends to be a hotel that is immersed in nature and immerses you in, meaning often the hotel rooms, if you will, in this scenario are not rooms within four walls of a typical hotel building, but they are, the individual cabins or individual lodging units, whatever they're made of, that are dispersed out in nature separately so that you have your own unit. And that cabin, for example, often has floor to ceiling glass, similar to like the mirror cabins that are available. And that allows you, while you're inside, to almost bring nature in, because floor to ceiling glass allows you all of the views of everything going on around you in the woods, in the field, wherever your unit is. And you can be in bed, or you can be, at the breakfast table in there or on the sofa, and all you do is, typically see nature and see what's around you, whether it's incredible views or it's the woods or whatever it might be. So it's a combination of glamping and hotel, and I think it's kind of glamping on steroids or hotel dropped into nature. And there's some great examples of some landscape hotels around the country that we can talk about.
Yeah, great. Yeah, it sounds very relaxing and very sort of revitalizing, the whole concept. Yeah.
I think it's meant to be originally as something exactly like that, where it gets you back, whether this is a post-COVID thing or not. And I kind of think it, based on our research, it certainly blew up post-COVID because everyone went outside to, socially distance and went glamping and camping and what have you. It is meant to just take everything down a level and get you back, immersed into nature and have you remember how beautiful it can be and have you enjoy it while having a great lodging experience as well. So some folks will use it to get away and just quietly work and catch up and work remote. And other people will go to really just relax and walk and hike and read a book or do whatever makes them happy.
Yeah, that's great. That's great. Now I want to stay at one. What are some standout guest experiences that these properties offer?
Well, I would tell you to take a look at the properties, and they individually obviously will communicate why they are different or what they offer. I think a majority, or at the crux of what they are, is they offer this opportunity to be out in nature. So to be near hiking trails, to be near walking trails, near fields, near a farm, somewhere where you can get out of your unit and just enjoy nature, whatever that might be. One of the more popular, and I hesitate to call it the originator, but it feels almost like it's the one that got the most notoriety as landscape hotels started to be talked about. And it's called Puyallup, and it's based in the Hudson Valley in the Catskills area. And they have, various different amenities, from a beautiful pool to an in-house restaurant that you can enjoy, in addition to obviously being pretty out there in nature. So being able to hike around and enjoy that. There's another property that we were a part of called The Prospect, which is in the Berkshires of Massachusetts. They just recently opened. That is 49 luxury cabins. I would consider it a landscape hotel. It's not necessarily part of their marketing per se, but they are immersed in nature and they're amongst the trees and they're overlooking a lake, and you have to walk on paths, and there's no cars that take you to your unit. You have to park in the parking lot and get driven to the unit. And they offer beautiful lakeside saunas, and they have pickleball and a tennis court and group saunas and individual saunas and a lakeside restaurant. So it really depends which one you go to, but at the end of the day, whether it's just lodging in the woods or it's lodging in the woods with amenities, it's definitely meant to emphasize the environment part of the experience.
Yeah, that's wonderful. How do you deliver high-end comfort in locations where resources are limited?
Try as hard as you can. You know, it comes down to all sorts of things, and you know, each location is different. Each location has its individual challenge. I would say at the base of it, it comes down to setting up the property for success as you're developing it, as you're creating it, as you're concepting it, so that you're prepared for those remote challenges, as you asked, whether it's, you know, an hour to the next town, or there's no employee base, and so you have to think of employee housing, or there's really nothing to do other than to just relax, and so you might need to create some activities for your guests, mountain bikes or off-road bikes, or kayaks or canoes if you have water, or something to that effect. So it really comes down to, you know, understanding where you're creating this concept, what's around you, and how you're going to achieve the experience that you are building and you are hoping to give to your guests. And it obviously depends. If you're a lodging destination, just lodging, and there's no food and beverage, you know, maybe there's a camp store, but there's no restaurant or bar or anything like that. Not that it's less, but I think you have less challenges because you don't have the food and beverage challenge, which is a bear of an operation at any property to manage. Yeah. You add food and beverage to that, I think you've upped your challenges, you know, with being able to cater to just the folks on site and what have you. So plan, and develop smartly. Really, at the end of the day.
That's a good point. Yeah, you know, a lot of people focus on the operations, but you know, if you don't get it right in the first place with the development, then yeah, that's a huge point.
Well, in operations, which is typically what we do when we come into a new project, we are the operational mouthpiece, if you will, or operational sensibility to blend the architect, the designer, the owner, and all those other pieces that are part of a development. We're the operational side of things and the operational voice. And we go, okay, hold on. If cars are coming in here, where are they going to park? Where is storage? How do they get to their unit? Where are the offices? Where are the bathrooms? If, you know, we offer XYZ. So operationally, 100%, it has to be thought through so that when it's open, it operates efficiently and effectively as, you know, as possible versus it being an afterthought.
Great. Let's talk a little bit about the tech that's used in remote hospitality. I know when we talked about doing this podcast, you know, a week ago or so, you were talking about, you know, property management systems and putting those into place and kind of bringing that from the luxury hotel operations to this landscape model. Could you talk a little bit about that?
Sure. And you know, I don't know if there's really a difference between unique, distinctive, independent hotels, luxury hotels, which is, you know, where we come from, and outdoor hospitality or landscape hotels. It's just a alternative lodging type, if you will. It's, you know, individual units versus rooms within a building. At the end of the day, you need all of the same systems. You need the PMS system, you need the POS system, you need, you know, some form of accounting, revenue management, so on and so forth. So really the systems don't necessarily change other than perhaps using a more outdoor hospitality focused one if desired for a landscape hotel, or since it's essentially a hotel, you can adopt really any one of the technologies that are used for a traditional brick and mortar hotel, if you will. A little more challenging, possibly, to your point, if it's out in nature and it's more remote, top of a mountain, bottom of a valley, whatever it might be, the Wi-Fi, the high speed, the connection to the world becomes a challenge. And all systems these days are cloud-based. And we focus on only using cost-effective, cloud-based, easy to use, you know, yet robust, which sometimes can be an oxymoron, cloud, you know, systems, technology systems in order to operate the property, the PMS, the POS, what have you. So with some of these more remote locations, our Oregon property is a good example of that. It's on the Oregon coast. It's on the side of a mountain overlooking the ocean called Two Capes Lookout. It's a property we manage under our CaraVenture brand, but there's no cell reception there. And
That's only a plus and a minus, right?
A plus and a minus, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, people, you know, some people get away to disconnect and some people get away to connect in a different way. They want to sit around the fire and work on their email and catch up in a relaxed environment. And some don't want that cell service, and that's exactly what they want. So using that property as an example, there is no cell service, there is no wired high speed. And so we rely on satellite, Starlink in that scenario, which is very popular with more remote locations, to give us that high speed. And all of our systems are then fed through that Starlink high speed. And that allows us to operate. The locks are controlled like that. The PMS is controlled, property management system like that, and all of our other systems, the employee app to clock in and clock out, everything is on high speed. So having a strong signal like that in order to operate these cloud-based systems is really important because they're all in the cloud. They're typically not on site or server-based anymore.
Yeah, particularly with the locks. If those don't work, then you're in big trouble.
Well, and especially 100%, and especially if you have the type of locks that communicate to your property management system so that you put a code in, it sends it to the lock, and when the guest gets there, they punch it in and it works.
Yeah.
And especially with locations where maybe remote check-in is remote and you communicate everything to the guest via text or what have you, and they show up on their own, they look at their text, they find cabin number 5, they punch in a code and in they go. So that connectivity is really important in all environments, but certainly more in a more remote environment for sure.
Yeah, for sure. Are there systems you're using to help you reduce energy or waste?
Good question. We should be. We should probably be doing more of that, to control waste up to the extent we can. Obviously, if there's a local provider, we recycle to the extent we can. We have garbage cans and recycling cans in each of our guest rooms. It's a one, garbage can, if you will, divided in half so people separate their recyclables so that we can do that if we have a local vendor that will collect them. So we definitely focus on that. Typically, depending on the property, if it has a restaurant, very different. If it doesn't, we typically have cutlery and plateware and what have you for folks, but we try to make those out of renewable products, bamboo or something to that effect, so that when they land in the waste, they decompose quicker than plastic might. We don't use garbage bags in our guest rooms and bathrooms because the container that is in the garbage can is washable. It's a liner. We pull it out, we dump the garbage, we clean it, put it back in. So no garbage bags from every single room going into the dump. So operationally, we try to focus on things that we can control in those areas. Outdoor lights often are on a sensor, so they go off after there's no movement, especially in the parking lot, and that controls our energy cost. But there's always more that we can do. It kind of depends on the abilities, the location, and the costs associated and the size of the operation.
Gotcha. Yeah, that's good. What tech trends are you kind of following in the boutique hospitality space?
Tech trends. That's a good question. So I guess if we've been talking about kind of outdoor hospitality, which covers, more glamping and higher end RV, and maybe a landscape hotel is somewhere in between, and hotels are on this side, outdoor hospitality over here, and glamping or, landscape hotels in the middle. We're on the outdoor hospitality side. I would say over the last couple years, the adoption and increase of the number of cloud-based, easy-to-use property management systems for the outdoor hospitality space have definitely come out of the woodwork, as have, and this is something I'm definitely keeping an eye on, there is not necessarily, in my opinion, a significant presence in the outdoor hospitality space, in the outdoor hospitality space for OTAs. And what I mean by that is in the hotel side, on the hotel side of things, and they kind of bleed over into outdoor hospitality, you have Booking.com and Expedia and some of those big boys. You don't really have the big boys, which is a pro and a con, in the outdoor hospitality space. And so I've been watching that because little ones have popped up like Book Outdoors and Spot Tonight and Hip Camp and Glamping Hub. And some of them are starting to be bought by each other and some are, merging together. And so from a tech perspective, it's interesting to see who's going to rise to the top of the OTA stack, if you will, to be that aggregator of come to us, we have access to all the outdoor hospitality spaces, kind of like Expedia does for hotels. So I've been watching that and curious what will happen. I think that there will be eventually a consolidation of all these different cloud-based PMSs because they're so different yet so much similar. What really is the difference between one and the other? And so we'll see. But yeah, it's interesting how tech that we have used in the hotel side of the industry for years, dozens, I'd say hundreds, but it's not true, dozens of years, is slowly but surely and now very, heavily making its way into outdoor hospitality and really starting to explode and expand. So keeping an eye on that.
Okay. Yeah, that's interesting. Let's talk about scaling. How do you scale operations? First of all, what's the mission behind Q Hospitality Management?
Good question. Our mission, that's a very good question. But, if I think about every day, why we get up, what we do, what we're doing, where we came from, where we're going, our goal at the end of the day is to provide the best possible service by the best possible team to unique and distinctive independent hotels and to the outdoor hospitality world, period. And how we do that is, by being unique and distinctive ourselves, by coming from the hotel world into outdoor hospitality, where, we think that's a differentiator for us versus many folks in outdoor hospitality. Not all, but many came from outdoor hospitality, so they don't necessarily come with that mentality, attention to detail, attention to service, and what have you, that is typical in independent luxury hotels, which is, again, our background. So that's our focus, and our mission, our goal, what we get up for every day is really to grow our network of support and really be that go-to team in smaller independent hotel hospitality and outdoor hospitality, but also primarily to be the go-to for third-party management in the luxury glamping space and in the higher-end RV space with our new recently launched brand Caraventure. And so we're really hoping that our differentiator with Caraventure as well, coming into this space and bringing in, how we operate hotels to outdoor hospitality and allowing us to perhaps operate at a higher level to really set us apart. And so our goal every day is to build the Caraventure collection of amazing destinations and owners that want the type of support we bring. And honestly, just to have fun. It's an incredible business, and it's all about having fun, paying it forward, doing whatever we need to do to have a good time and help folks. And that's one of the things that's one of our mantras is our answer is yes. And if it's not yes, it's yes. And if it's still not yes, it's yes.
Yeah.
And that's our goal at the end of the day, if we can live by that.
Yeah. Yeah, that's great. Yeah, I love that you pointed out that fun is a central element of it. A lot of people forget that when trying to get business done, and the fun part's the fun part, right?
It has to be. I mean, hospitality is supposed to be fun. You're supposed to be hospitable. You meet people from all over the world. With the outdoor hospitality side, you're outside all the time. You're incredible locations, amazing views. So absolutely, it's got to be fun. If it's not fun, boy, you're in the wrong industry, wrong business, and wrong job.
So let's move on to smaller operators. How do they struggle to scale in the market?
A good question. I can't speak for anybody else, but I would make the assumption, if your question is, location number one is started by an operator, and then they want to start location number two of the same brand and location number 3 and 4. Honestly, I think there's a couple things that probably come into the challenge of scaling. And first and foremost is probably funds.
Yeah.
Period.
Yeah. It's always there, isn't it?
There's my answer. Done. Next. But in all seriousness, I think it's funds, then it's funds, then it's funds. And then after that, I think it is, depending on the operator, and if they came from the hospitality industry, any side of it, and they open their first property, they have a sense of how hospitality works, and they know because they were a former employee for somebody, versus somebody that had the money, got the money, found the money, opened a property, had never been in hospitality, has figured it out maybe over a couple years. There's probably some of those that are brilliant and could easily do another one because they've made all the mistakes in the first one. They know what to do. They've got a track record, proof of concept, can easily get funding, or easier get funding, more easily get funding for the next one. And then I think there's some folks that kind of landed in it by mistake because they love the thought of it, or they've been in it before, and they ended up being great because they figured things out, but they're not necessarily hospitality operators, and maybe they're operating at more mom and pop versus like a traditional hospitality operation, and they're not sure how to go to the next step. And now they've got to oversee 2 properties and hire for 2 properties or hire for 3, and they've got to manage all 3. And now there's a GM short at this one and this one and that one. And what do you do? And, so I think it comes down to the individual. It comes down to the funding. It comes down to the team you surround yourself with to be able to spread everybody thin, to be able to do property number 2 and property number 3. So I think there's many things that go into it. I think the folks that can successfully expand or grow have figured out the funding scenario, have been surrounded by or are a good operational team, and just have a really good hospitality sensibility, or bring somebody on that does in order to help them do that.
Okay, great. Yeah, great answer. How does consolidation help with operational and energy efficiency? Of course, I've got to ask about energy because we're an energy company, but how does consolidation help with, overall efficiency, operational and energy?
Consolidation, meaning if you have more than one property, consolidating operations, or?
Yeah, it could be that, or it could also be, maybe acquisitions that, where the industry is consolidating as well.
I mean, I think with consolidation, whether I start with one and then I have 3 properties, and the one regional manager is the manager overall, so now I don't need 3 separate managers, or, somebody has multiple properties and they buy another group of multiple properties. The consolidation opportunity, I think, is, in optimizing your operation and streamlining your expenses. There's certainly technology discounts. The more properties you have, there's certainly operational efficiencies. The more properties you have, because you can, again, depending on the setup and the structure, this is very high level. You can go to, a regional general manager and maybe have a junior manager on site because you've got regional support. The one sales and marketing person or the one social media person, what have you, now can do 3 properties, for pretty much close to the cost that he or she did one prop. So I think you're able to spread some of the corporate expenses and the higher level expenses across properties, whether it's benefits, from vendors because you give them 2 or 3 of your properties, or it's an in-house employee and you can now spread the cost of their salary across a couple. I think that's where the efficiencies are. You can now co-market. So you bring 3 property budgets to be able to get a bigger marketing, bigger ad, bigger, footprint, if you will. There's efficiency in that, and perhaps that gets the word out, further, farther, faster. From an environmental standpoint, I don't know. It really depends on what type of property it is, for RV versus glamping or hotel type of thing. I'm sure there's some efficiency to be had, certainly in the purchasing of environmentally friendly products that, can help reduce waste on site for each of the properties. Often there's environmental control programs that we're familiar with in hotels that you can initiate and set up, where the thermostat reduces to a certain temperature set when guests check out, and when they check in, it goes up so you're not wasting energy. When they're not in the room, it senses they're not and it goes down. There's opportunities there, I think, that with scale become more cost effective and something that can be adopted, because now you have 3 landscape hotels that each have, 50 rooms. And so now you're bringing 150 rooms to the table. Those environmental controls to reduce energy and what have you suddenly become, at times with scale like that, more cost effective and can probably be taken advantage of versus one property trying to do it.
Gotcha. Yeah, I think the message coming through from you is that, the core services model, right? Where you can consolidate those services, you can spread across your portfolio.
For sure.
Is really what's going to enable you to scale.
It's one of the bigger ones, for sure, aside from finding the money to do it. But certainly those core services, being able to spread those across the properties. And then with scale, it allows you to then hire more people to provide those core services so that you can scale. So it's a chicken and an egg kind of thing, but 100%, You're right.
Yep. What investments matter most in growing a, remote hospitality hotel?
After it's open or before?
Well, yeah, it's kind of a broad question there. So yeah, maybe a little of both.
The answer is yes to both.
Yes.
What investments matter the most? Wow. Well, I'd say in the pre-opening development part of a new project, I'd say this goes back to, I think, your original question, but the investment in the development, the proper development operationally of a property is the best investment possible, because it's thought out. You future proof the property in thinking about what are we going to need to do XYZ. Let's build that in. Let's develop it now, versus you open and go, shoot, we didn't build a housekeeping office. Now we have to, build that as well, which might be more cost effective at that point, might not fit in aesthetically. So for a new property, I think the best investment can be building it so that you are able to execute the experience that you are building the property for. So investing wisely in the aspects of the development that will allow you to create the experience once the property is open, whatever that might be. Extra long rows to get you further into the woods, to get the cabins better view, to allow you to charge more, to give guests a more, remote experience, if you will. Whatever it is, invest in the experience you're creating. Once the property's open, I would say the best thing to invest in, obviously, honestly, is probably your employees. For me, number one. For us, employees are always number one. Before the owner, before the guests, the employees for us are number one, to the extent they can be, from an investment standpoint as well, whether actual investment dollars or just time type of thing. Because if we take care of our employees, they take care of the property. They take care of the property. The guests come, have a great time. They spend money. Owner's happy. It's a perfect ROI there. So that would be, with my HR hat on. And it's honestly true, because we rely 100% as a remote management company, as all are, on the employees from the GM on down to operate the property and create an incredible experience for the guests. So we need to invest in them. That aside, I would say the upkeep of the property is 100% the most important investment, whether it's landscaping, painting, utilities, adding additional amenities to create additional experiences, really upkeeping the property so that it feels as close as it can to how it was when it originally opens. Because more than likely, you're probably charging way more money now, 6 months, a year, 2, 3 years down the road, than you were when you opened, yet the property's older.
Yeah.
So keeping the property up is first and foremost, so that people coming week 1 and year 5 have a very similar, if not same experience.
Great. Let's talk a little bit about guests' expectations around sustainability. What are they bringing when they come onto your properties in terms of expectations? That is, yeah.
Yeah. I don't know if it's certainly not something verbalized. So the answer is, I don't know. I don't know if they are bringing expectations other than seeing or experience what we may have talked about on our website and in our communications about what we're doing that's environmentally friendly on the property. And so I would imagine their expectations, for example, at Two Capes Lookout, we recycled some of the trees that we had to cut down for the property, and we turned them into benches around the community fire pit. So they get to sit on these old trees that used to be there in the woods. And so perhaps they know about that if it's important to them and they read about it on our website, then they want to experience that. We have wetlands that we preserve that you drive through as you come to the property. Perhaps, they want to see that or feel that as they come in, because it's the first thing you see. It really depends on our messaging and our focus and our ability to be environmentally friendly at a specific property, which is, in all honesty, not always a focus. There are aspects of environmental sustainability or good practices that's always part of the operation. But, and maybe it should be if you're out in nature, because at the end of the day, you're out in nature, and so you should be as environmentally focused as possible. I don't know if people come yet. I don't know the answer yet if they come with this heightened expectation of this is, the greenest property I'm ever going to go to because they're on solar and they have geothermal wells and that type of thing. So I think they expect what they've read about us and hope that they see that we're doing what we said we were doing on the website, or we can talk about what we've done in the development phase to, be environmentally friendly.
Yeah.
That's it.
So how do you communicate this sustainability, initiatives that you've
Mhm.
got? You mentioned the website. Is there anything in room or, on the property or otherwise that, you talk about what you've done with the property to make it more sustainable?
There can be. It kind of depends on the property. It certainly is always in communication on the website. It often is in communication in some of our pre-arrival emails. We typically communicate some of it in the digital guest directory that everybody gets access to via a link that we text them so they can, read about it if they have interest in that, if they didn't see it on the website. At times, kind of depending on if it's significant environmental focus and it feels like it's worth sharing so that it doesn't feel like greenwashing, if you will.
Yeah.
There might be communication in the room. For example, in hotels, it's very common and often we'll have something in the bathroom that says, we'd like to, protect our water source. If you don't need your towels washed, if you don't need your sheets changed, if you don't need your room cleaned, please put this on the door, put this in the, in the sink, put this on the tub, whatever it might be. And we won't wash, until you depart type of thing. So there's those aspects that are there. And by virtue at most of our glamping properties of not providing housekeeping services until departure, most people are a 2-day stay, so that works. We are being more environmentally friendly, if you will, though we don't communicate that via any documentation because we're not pulling towels every single day and giving them brand new ones, and thus those have to be washed and use more water and chemicals. So we do a lot that we don't communicate because it's maybe expected, but slowly but surely at the Oregon property and at others, depending on what their focus is and if there's opportunities to share anything environmental, often there could be signage around the property. Hey, this used to be a tree. We think it was 200 years old. It's now a bench that you're sitting on, enjoying your s'mores type of thing. So it really depends on the property. Another example of that, though, is the Oregon property is part of the Kind Traveler program, which has a focus on traveling to environmentally friendly or kind properties around the country. And they just invited in Oregon to join their Oregon program another 7 or 14 properties this year, and we were one of them selected because
Congratulations.
Thank you very much. Thank you. It starts July 1st, and you can book through Kind Traveler, or you can book through our website, and really, it's meant to be a portal for folks, if you were to go to the Kind Traveler program, to look for properties that respect the environment, that take care of the environment on the property. And in addition to that, and that could be, anything, including everything we've talked about, how we recycled things on the property when we built the property. But the important part of that is for every guest that stays at Two Capes, for example, we donate $1 for every night occupied to a local environmental charity in our area that's taking care of the coast or the woods or what have you, depending on the one that you choose. So you can choose a charity to support that takes care of the environment. And by guests staying at your property, depending how you set the program up, you can donate to these charities. And by virtue of the guests staying there, they unofficially end up donating as well. So that's another way that we try to give back to our properties that can join that program.
Okay, great. Let's get into the energy side of things. I know that's not exactly your forte, but maybe there's some things you're aware of that are going on, or maybe it, will become part of your strategy going forward. How do you manage energy at remote locations?
Kind of depends if you're on the grid or off the grid, I would assume. I, honestly don't have a lot of off the grid experience because we typically only work with on grid properties, if you will, from at least the power perspective.
Mm-hmm.
It really depends. Back in the day, many years ago, we opened up a hotel property down in California that was LEED Platinum Hotel, which, if anyone knows LEED, which was really big back in 2008, 9, 10.
Yeah.
They know the level of LEED requires, and this was the first luxury LEED Platinum hotel in the world at the time. And it had geothermal wells, and it had sensors in the room that opened the curtains and closed the curtains depending on if you were there, turned the fireplace on or the lights. We had solar on the roof. So there's that extent that property wanted to go to for only 30 units in a $60 million development.
Wow, 30 units. That must be a pretty luxury place. Yeah.
It is. It's
Yeah.
you're in the 6, 7, 800, or more a night, depending on the time of year. But that property, including being, many of the buildings in the room being built out of some form of recycled, bricks or stone or what have you, that was ground up and turned into, concrete or something to that effect. That was an incredible focus on controlling, the environmental impact of that property and controlling the utilities by using geothermal well and solar and all those things. For most properties, and again, we don't really do any off grid, and I'd imagine they rely 100% on solar and well and septic type of thing. We see in the RV space, we see metering controls to help control the electricity that is being used, and you can meter each of the podiums in an RV park and control the use of utilities like that, so that someone's not running their RV, their Tesla, and 5 air conditioners type of thing. In the glamping space, it's a little bit harder. Typically, you're on grid. There's not a lot you can do, or in the smaller independent hotels, there's not a lot you can do unless you have the ability to put in those thermostat controls, if you will, if you have some form of ability to do so, to change and control the temperatures and turn it off and on, when the rooms are occupied, and thus controlling the energy. We try in the small areas, controlling energy as we can, keeping the lights off, keeping the AC and the heat off when the units are not used, having the lights have sensors, in the parking lot to save on energy. So we're always looking at opportunities, but often for small properties that we get involved in, the more environmental you want to be, the more costly it is to do that. And that often doesn't play well with small property budgets.
Gotcha. Yeah. Yeah. There's a lot of measures that can be taken that do have hard ROI. So, that there's a tension there. Exactly what you said, though. There's an investment that needs to be made, and does it provide an ROI or not? And it depends on what type of investment it is. But it depends on what the cost of energy is where you are. So yeah, there's a lot of variables that go into those decisions. That's for sure.
Well, and I think a lot of the variables are people don't know what they don't know.
Yeah.
And so, okay, what are the controls available?
Mm-hmm.
Who do I go to? What vendors do it? Where do I even start looking? Like, if I don't know what I'm looking for, how do I even look for it? So I think there's a lack of, and I include myself in, knowledge of what controls might be out there to be able to, reduce energy.
Yeah. We see that a lot. We're in the energy services space, and it's amazing, what people know and what they don't know. Yeah. But, that's why there's experts, and you're an expert in hotel management, and you know that better than probably anybody else. And yeah, that everybody has their place. And
absolutely.
Yeah, it's definitely.
And we used environmental expert like that on that Napa project. You're absolutely right, because that was their specialty, and they could help us with, the geothermal wells and the solar and the, dashboard to see the metrics of what we were saving and all that.
Oh, that's great. That's great. Yeah. So you have adopted some of those measures at some of your locations, it sounds like.
Yeah, the hotel one was many years ago, and that's not associated with Q Hospitality. That's a past project that I was a part of in a prior life, but it speaks to the environmental focus and the experience of that. We do adopt what we can based on location, property, budget, ownership's desire, and the facility. We adopt what we can to be as environmentally friendly as possible and as the operation allows in most, not all, but most cases. Yeah.
Okay, great. Let's talk a little bit about, the look ahead. Where is the landscape hotel market headed?
I don't know. That's a good question. You would have thought with the popular rise in it, with Puyallup, with Ambiente, which is another one in Sedona, Arizona, with the Prospect Hotel in the Berkshires, you think there would have been a rise, and with the complete blowing up of glamping post-COVID, you think there would have been a rise in this landscape hotel space, because it is that blend of getting out in nature, which everyone really embraced during and post-COVID, and luxury hotels, and a kind of a combination of the two for those who don't want to sleep on the floor, don't want to camp, don't want to bring their own stuff, or don't want to use a shared bathroom. So you think there would have been a bigger explosion of that. So I'm kind of surprised, in all honesty. I think it, may be a niche of a niche of a niche type of thing that, hasn't been adopted too widely yet, but is slowly but surely making its, way in to the outdoor hospitality hotel space. Is people want to do something a little less than a hotel, but more than glamping kind of thing. So I could see it continuing to happen. I think there's some form of future, because we've seen two projects like this of converting RV parks to glamping destinations, 100% flip type of thing, because the permitting is essentially the same. And with the Prospect as an example, in another project we worked on in Maine, they had an incredible location with a horrible RV park, but the location was once in a lifetime. And so they scraped it and renovated it. And on, the sites where the RVs used to be, they put these beautiful $100,000 plus glamping cabins that are on a chassis and on wheels. And you skirt them so they all fall within the same permitting, but suddenly you're charging $400 a night instead of $45 a night.
Yeah.
So I think there's a future in that coming. I think that down the road, perhaps as folks see the opportunity of an incredible RV park, an incredible location, or a not so incredible RV park, an incredible location, to be able to flip it, assuming they can afford the investment, and to now have park models on it and charge 10 times as much or 5 times as much. I think there's that opportunity, and that's not necessarily called a landscape hotel, but I think that is coming down the road, in addition to the consolidation of the big hotel companies buying a lot of these outdoor hospitality groups.
Okay, great. What's one big operational issue you'd solve if you could? Staffing, yeah. That comes up all the time. Yeah.
Staffing. I mean, it depending on the location, obviously, and the more remote, the more challenging it is. And it goes back to our original discussion. Think about building employee housing to the extent you can. All easier said than done. Buy a local motel, turn it into residential, get a couple Airstreams, put staff in them, especially the more remote location that you have. Consider J1s, folks on visas that come for the summer from foreign countries to work. It really is staffing. It's finding the right, especially post-COVID, is finding the right staff with the right mentality, the right work ethic, and the desire to, create and give a good experience. And at the same time, the biggest challenge is probably tied to that is making sure that ownership understands that the employees are number one, and we have to take care of them first, and we have to pay them well or pay them more than the competitor if we want that good employee. So I think those two kind of go together.
Yeah, that makes sense. So one final question.
Sure.
What advice would you give to somebody that wants to start up a boutique hotel like this, a landscape type hotel?
Wow. How long do we have?
Yeah, as long as you want.
So just one piece of advice: due diligence, due diligence, due diligence. End of story, period. You've got to do the due diligence. Feasibility study, pro forma, research into what people are looking for in an area you're looking to develop yours. Who are your competitors? Are you just going to be just another one, the same as the one 10 miles down the road? Differentiate, be different, be unique, be distinctive, whether that's your area, the look of the property, the experience, the amenities, the cabins, whatever it is. But at the end of the day, spend money now doing due diligence to save money later fixing mistakes.
Great. Well, that was a great answer. Thank you very much, Quentin. Thank you.
Sure.
And that concludes the podcast, and very much appreciate you appearing on it. And we look forward to having more of these and getting this published. And thanks.
My pleasure. Thank you so much. Have a great day.